Hey there Internet, my name's Luxander, and today we're talking about politics again. This video might seem very off-brand, perhaps, considering the last two times I talked about politics, which were talking about Bernie Sanders and being a socialist, so I do want to just go ahead and get that out of the way really quick. I do consider myself a socialist, very broadly. I don't know necessarily a lot of the nitpicky things about what communism means, or you know, some people say, like, I'm a libertarian socialist. I am not that specific with my labels when it comes to political affiliation. I am registered as a Democrat, and I consider myself a leftist and a socialist. That's about as specific as I get with just the labels for the belief systems, okay? Bernie would have been my first choice for president, and for, obviously, the Democratic nomination. I've already talked about this before. The situation that we're in now is that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are the two people who are on the ticket for the Democratic side of things. And as much as it sucks, I have to say, I am out here riding for Biden. I am not super enthusiastic about this, but I feel that I made a mistake when the 2016 election was happening. I was very enthusiastic for a Bernie presidency, and when it turned out that it was going to be Hillary Clinton on the ticket, I did not advocate for her. I may or may not have talked about this on the channel before, but it is a personal failing, I feel, that my lack of enthusiasm for the candidate not being as left-wing as I wanted, not being perfect and aligned with my beliefs and values, it was a barrier to me trying to convince people to vote blue. I am trying to not make that same mistake again. I'm not necessarily the kind of person who gets politically involved and calls and texts people in order to try to like convince them one way or the other, but I do have this platform, and I do want to take the opportunity to talk about why I think it's important to vocally support Joe Biden and to vote for Joe Biden, even if you are ideologically opposed to things that he has done in the past, or if you have moral issues with the accusations relating to Tara Reade. To be absolutely clear, when I voted in the primary for my state, I did not include Joe Biden in my choices. I said first choice Bernie Sanders, second choice Elizabeth Warren, and I left Joe Biden off completely because I am morally not comfortable with having someone who is accused of sexual assault as the presidential nominee and as the president. We currently have a president who has been accused of sexual assault and has settled these things out of court in order to avoid true accountability for these actions. It is a problem. Undoubtedly, it is 100% a problem that these men in power have been accused of heinous things, and who, as far as I can tell, have done those things because of their behavior in attempting to cover it up. Those people being in power is absolutely not okay. I can't say that it's not acceptable, though. In addition to being a socialist, I am an anti-fascist. We live in a country right now where children are being held in cages in areas where there's not enough space to move. These facilities are being sprayed with chemicals in the hopes of avoiding COVID, but it's basically just poisoning these people. There have been police killings almost every single day in 2020, despite quarantine. People are being killed by vigilantes at rallies and at protests. We are definitely in the middle of a rise of fascism. I do want to go ahead and mention the signs of fascism. Me just saying that we're in a rise of fascism, I understand that some people are going to hear that and think that that is a very wild way of putting things, but I want to contextualize this a bit, so I'll put up a graphic here and read them to you. So the 14 signs of fascism, the warning signs, early signs of fascism, are a powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights, identification of enemies/scapegoats, supremacy of the military, rampant sexism, controlled mass media, obsession with national security, religion and government intertwined, corporate power is protected, labor power is suppressed, disdain for intellectuals and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, rampant cronyism and corruption, and fraudulent elections. I'm not going to spend the time going through and validating each of those points. I think that many of them are very clear in regards to our current administration in the year of our Lord 2020. I'm sure there are many wonderful articles written that will go into further detail explaining how each one of those is a thing that we're dealing with right now, okay? This administration is threatening human rights. They have attempted to legislate transgender people out of the ability to seek civil rights protections, which I made a video about when this was initially a thing that was happening. They also recently tried to make it so that transgender healthcare is a thing that could just be religiously exempt from medical providers. There is now officially a hold on that. It was supposed to go into effect sometime, I believe, in this month, August, but luckily that has been stopped. And the reason I am talking about all of this, I want to be very clear about what we are up against. We are very, very, very much dealing with the rise of a fascist government. The United States, I believe, has always been fairly authoritarian. We gave the Nazis some of their ideas when it came to eugenics. Like, we as a country have not had a great track record when it comes to human rights. We have oppressed many different kinds of people, and for a lot of white folks, this is the first time we are becoming aware of these things. Our education system does a pretty good job of insulating us from the truth of these things, and as a result, we often don't listen to people of color and other marginalized people who tend to be the canaries in the coal mine for when things start to get a little bit more dicey. Many historians right now are kind of freaking out because many of the things that are happening in our country and with our government are fairly similar to things that were happening in the lead up to the Holocaust. And I am of the belief that you should do something before it gets to the point where people are being gassed in camps. So bearing all of that in mind, you should vote for Joe Biden. In this moment, I think it kind of doesn't matter that he is an old creepy man. In this moment, I don't think it matters that much that Kamala Harris has had a bad track record with the things that she chooses to criminalize and denying transgender people certain kinds of care while they're in prison. That is terrible. It is not as terrible as the idea of legislating transgender people out of existence and making it so that it's perfectly legal to let us die instead of giving us emergency medical care. They are not perfect, but they are not fascist. And that is what we are up against right now. I do believe that many decades of voting for harm reduction has resulted in a pulling of the Overton window to the right. I do think that that is an issue that we need to address when we are not dealing with actual fascism. I have many political, ideological, and moral disagreements with Joe Biden and with Kamala Harris. And frankly, I live in a red state where I feel like my vote kind of doesn't matter anyway, but I am going to vote for Joe Biden. I have the option available to me to vote my conscience and have it kind of not make a difference because we are not on a popular vote system. It's state by state sort of aggregate thing going on here. But if there are other people here, this is a Republican state, if there are Republicans who are disgusted with what is happening under the Trump administration and Joe Biden is like close enough to a Republican that they could stomach voting for him, I am going to contribute as much as I possibly can to a flip of my state. It's not going to happen. It's definitely not going to happen. But I am going to do my best to contribute to that by voting and by advocating for other people to try to vote similarly. Right now, if you think your state is like a safe bet, like that it's going to go a certain type of way, that it's definitely going to do that if you choose to abstain or if you vote third party. And like, honestly, I don't even necessarily believe that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, like that their administration is going to be particularly open to the leftist ideas that we would like to push. I'm pretty sure that they are against Medicare for all, although I'm not sure that they're against a public option for healthcare. What I'm trying to say is that I'm not even sure that they are going to be an administration that we can wrangle further to the left, but a centrist administration is far better than a fascist one. I think it is important to take a moment and consider what we are going to do if Joe Biden does win the election and Trump refuses to leave office. I would like to believe that there are, for example, people in the military, high-ranking people in the military, who will not allow him to use military strength to retain that power. In some regards, it might be like safer in a civil war sense if Trump just outright wins the election, which may happen anyway due to many various factors that we're seeing come to light about the 2016 election. It is possible for these electronic voting systems to be hacked. We are very clearly seeing an attempt to dismantle the United States Postal Service to prevent mail-in ballots. There are a lot of ways in which this election could be totally fraudulent in its result. But we need to be aware of those things and try to orient our tactics around preventing that obstruction. I know in my city where I've been voting the last couple of elections, there are paper ballots and there is an option to vote early. If you have the option to vote early, in person, I'm speaking of, I think that is a great option if you want to avoid the large crowds and the potential for mishaps on the day of the election. If it's possible for you to request a paper ballot in a situation where the standard is an electronic situation, that would be most preferable. If you live in a place where your mail-in ballot can be brought to the location of voting instead of letting it go through the mail process, that is also optimal. And keep in mind that the presidential election is not necessarily the only election happening in your area. Congressional elections are also happening this year. There are 35 Senate seats, and all of the 435 House seats are up for re-election. It is important for you to vote down ballot and to do as much research as you can before you go to vote about those representatives. I believe it's different state by state as to whether your state congressional elections are happening this year, but absolutely make sure to check those out. And also do the research about which judges are up for re-election as well. For the most part, public records are available, and you can find out which way these judges tend to rule on issues that are important to you. I think there are various websites like Ballotpedia might do a sample ballot, but if you give your address, it will tell you, like, if you're voting in this locality, these are all the things that you will be able to vote for. It is absolutely worth your time to check out those things down the ballot. I cannot stress the importance of trying to vote blue in as many cases as you possibly can. And not only do you need to vote, if you are capable of doing so, you should also try to encourage other people to vote. If you know a friend who doesn't have a car, if they happen to have a day off that you also have free time, take them with you to go vote early. If you're for some reason not able to vote early or not able to vote by mail, then you need to make a plan for when you're going to show up at your polling place on the day of the actual election. The election itself, I think, is November 3rd this year. You should have time between now and then to request a day off. Whatever you can do, you need to make it happen. If you know apathetic people who are in the voting range, I think at this stage it should be early enough in most states for you to register to vote. So encourage those people to register to vote. Appeal to their sense of personal, emotional obligation to other people. If you're trans, explain to them the ways in which your rights are in danger. There is a Twitter thread of hundreds of examples of police starting the violence at these protests. Show them that. Bring it to their attention. I will put it in the description for you. This is not the time to sit on your hands and be idle. It is absolutely not. I know many people have a difficult time imagining what they can do in this very difficult situation. Like, it is an overwhelmingly oppressive situation, and COVID has everybody very freaked out. The idea of going to a protest is extremely terrifying. Seeing photojournalists' eyes being shot out and less lethal munitions being used, pointed at people's chests and heads, like, it is dangerous, and I can understand a feeling of helplessness about what you could possibly do, but you have a vote. You have the ability to use ResistBot to call and text your representatives. All of these things are within your power, and it may well get to the point where there is no other option but a genuine revolution. And in that instance, we have to be very careful, because a revolution could be a socialist revolution, or it could be a fascist revolution. There are very clearly people who are willing to take up arms and attempt to go to a protest and try to protect businesses and kill people in the meantime. And it's also very clear that the police are not really going to do much about that. Like, you ever wonder why police don't disrupt KKK rallies? You ever wonder? This video has a very serious tone because we're dealing with very serious shit right now. I don't want you to be discouraged by how overwhelming this situation seems. I want you to empower yourself. I want you to know exactly what it is you can do to contribute to getting this administration out of there. It may well be extremely difficult to have these conversations with older family members or your very politically apathetic coworkers, but it's necessary work. And frankly, you might do better if you avoid using words like fascist. I am being very emphatic because I have very strong feelings about this, and because I think it's important to call it what you see. But it may be more effective to simply demonstrate all of the things that are fascist without calling them fascist. Like, oh, Trump is joking on Twitter about not leaving office if the election doesn't go his way. Isn't that strange? Isn't that kind of scary? Isn't that kind of un-American? Despite the difficulty, people have more sense than you think they do. People are more susceptible to having their minds changed than you think they are. Sometimes it just takes a critical piece of information or appealing to their American values to bring them over. And your goal here is not to bring people over to suddenly they're a socialist now. You just need to make them anti-fascist. I think that's going to be all from me today. If you like the video, give it thumbs up, share it with someone who you think needs to hear it. You can comment below to help with the analytics. And of course, let me know your thoughts. If there are any tactics that you're aware of that I did not mention, I will read through and I will curate a list of those things and add them to a pinned comment. As always, you can check me out on Patreon or PayPal, ring the bell to get notified of when I upload, subscribe if you wish, and I hope you do your best to have an okay day. Bye. Thank you so much to my patrons for your ongoing support. I want to especially thank Sean, Tina M, Bisexual Disaster, Michelle Winter, R. Halverson, Sarah A, Suzanne Maynard, Wellington Marcus, Athiette, Amanda B, Frozen Summers, Elizabeth Bartell, Eileen McCall, Rose Above It Showing Up, and Mr. Atheist.